All right, guys. We just finished up with learning all of our major tools here. Kind of a quick, fast, down and dirty run through of all of these. We didn't get to the camera tool and hand tool because these are pretty easy and magnifying tool. These are pretty easy to understand. You should know these from Photoshop with the hand tool. You can drag and pan around. So if you are zoomed in, you can then pan around and look with your hand tool, just clicking and dragging around. Um, so what I want to do is actually clear this out. You can either erase what you have here. Um, you can lasso everything. So if I went to zoom out, I can lasso everything here that I don't want and just delete it. Or you can just create a new format or new stage. So I have a couple things I want to talk about here. Let me back out a little bit. Um, I created a layer. I'm going to delete one of these layers. And so I'm going to select it and just delete it. And just deal with layer 1 for right now. Um, what I want to get into is our first little quick down and dirty animation, because that's what it comes down to. That's what we're here for. That's what we want to do. So let's get into it. I want to first create a ground. So down here in my timeline, on my layer 1, I'm going to double click it. I'm going to label it ground. All right. Now I want to create a shape for the ground. I'm just going to start off with something basic. Okay. Keep it simple for right now. Rectangle tool. I'm going to change the color here for the inside. I want it to be green. And actually for this, I don't want a stroke. So I'm just going to turn that off. Now I'm going to drag out a line that covers the bottom part of my stage. It's okay if it hangs off the edges because that's not going to show. So there we go. Forgot about that, Bill. So got a ground here. Now what I want to do, I'm going to add a new layer. So I'm going to click on the new layer and I'm going to put it, title this one Stickman. Oh, and you know what? I'm going to call it Boneman because that's the tool we're going to be talking about. Boneman. All right. I'm going to use the paintbrush tool, choose a new color, make Boneman a different color. And what I'm going to do is find a spot here to start drawing our Boneman. For this character, very simple. Keep it very, very simple because we're not going to get into all the steps it's going to take to create a full character. But I do want you to understand the basics of a timeline and how to move from one frame to the next. And that's what Boneman's going to help us do. So I got the head here. I'm going to draw the body. I'm going to draw arms. Draw legs. All right, he's a little bit out of proportion, but that's all right. And then what I'm going to do is go to Bone Tool. And with Bone Tool, it's going to work on objects that are fill objects like this, not the pencil or paintbrush. Those are stroke objects. That's why we use the paint or the brush tool. So with the Bone Tool, basically what you end up with is when I drag on his chest, and I want to start with the chest, I'm going to drag down to his hips, and then I'm going to drag from there. This bottom point here, I'm going to drag out to his feet. And you can add more joints if you wanted to add like knees and things too. But starting in the chest is going to be best because that is midpoint of your character. That's going to be where most of your other joints are going to be attached to. So starting there is good. Just, oh my gosh, I'm having a hard time with this. Wait till it's black and then drag up. All right. So I have a skeleton created for him. I've dragged out from the center section and then from his hips, major joints of this Boneman that we're going to animate. So I have this done. You'll notice that it creates this blue box, binding box around your object, and that's good. I'm going to click the selection tool, click off here off the stage. And then when I move this, you'll notice that he bends, he moves, right? He kind of distorts. That's why we're keeping him simple, because we're not going to get into all the steps right now that it takes to distort our Boneman. And so I think I accidentally pinned his arm down. Let me move that. There we go. So you'll notice that a pin shows up. I don't really want to pin him down. I just want to grab his appendage there and shake it all around. Now, so I have him, he's able to move around. You'll notice that when I created that, it creates what's called an armature. And so um, that is going to be the area where we animate this character. And we're going to do this really simple 24 frame, 1 second, because 1 second animation, because that is what our frames per second are set to right now. So I have my timeline I want to look at. Everything's really scrunched together here. If I want to change the way that looks, you can resize your timeline view with these controls. So if I want to, I'm dealing with 24, so I'm just going to zoom in so I see mostly the area that I'm going to be working with. I want to make this, I want to set up my animation by adding frames all the way to the end, 24 second or 24 frame mark. So I'm going to click out here on the 24 or the 1 second mark, and I'm going to click all three of these layers right here. And then I'm going to press F5 on my keyboard, or you can go to Insert Frame if you right click. So with that done, that is how long my animation is going to be. And so it's going to stop right there. Now, with the simple part, what makes working with the bone tool easy and Armature easy is in Animate is that you can just advance the next slide here or the next frame. Why did I call it a slide? I don't know. And then you adjust your character, right? And so simple as that. Every frame you advance to, you move, and you're going to notice it's going to create what's called a keyframe right here. So you can adjust those back. Now he's doing some sort of weird dance. We're going to animate by ones, which means every frame right here, I want you to create a new motion, new movement. You could, try to give them a walk cycle if you want to. You'll notice that when it starts to overlap, because we're dealing with very simple geometry right now, when it starts to overlap, like where his arm might overlap his head, you see it's going to create this kind of overlap shape right here. And that's fine. Don't worry about that. For what we're doing right now, we're just learning about timeline, learning how to create an animation. So now let's look at what I've got. All right. So I'm going to go through, add a few more animated frames all the way to 24, and we'll go from there. So take some time, go ahead and do that. All right, so I've gone through now and I've given him actions over 24 frames. You can see I have him running off and moving from one side through to the other, and then he kind of does a little weird derpy jump at the end. So I've got him there. He's animated now, and let's say I wanted to, as you're doing this, what could make it easier is as you're creating these motions, you can use what's called an onion skin at the bottom. And so as you're creating these motions, you can say, I want to see like where was he a few frames ago without having to move him back. And so what makes this easy is you can adjust. I can see even like where he's supposed to be going. So if I'm doing pose to pose, I want to see from one frame to the other. I can check out that range and see how I need to fill it in between, do my in-betweens. But right now we're primarily concerned with doing straight ahead animation. So we need to see like where he's been, and that way I know what my next action needs to be for him in the next frame. So onion skinning is really good to use. And now I want to see what this looks like. So you can check out view up on top and do a preview, or you can do Control Enter on your keyboard and see what kind of weird derpy thing you just made. So here he is. It's kind of weird, very fast moving, 24 frames per second. So that's a lot. So let me X out of that. And now let's look at our frames per second is 24. Let's try it at 12. And so let's see what that looks like. And with that set up, do a little preview. That's a little bit better, a little bit easier to follow now. So 12 and 24, 18, those are kind of typical go-to frames per second. So sometimes doing a straight ahead animation, it's easy to get a little carried away with your actions. So you can sometimes slow down your frames per second to make it a little bit clearer to see. And with that, We're going to get into the next one.